Okay, cool. Just refreshing. Yeah, so not amazingly, but not bad. I got some stuff done. Up on my site, the links in tutoring. So let me just get the stream live. Yeah. I'm finding that I'm getting distracted is one way to put it, but I'm like starting to focus on like other stuff, like work-related stuff. Which on the note of that, probably in like the 4 to 6 week period, where I'll like after that be working again. So I don't know exactly when, but yeah, sometime soon, I imagine. But I'll let you know when I get more info. Yeah. Anyway, so I've been doing
So are you doing more
stuff.
work now? Like, do you think we should change schedules potentially or not?
Maybe. Do you want to? Should we talk about it now or at the end of the thing?
Either way is fine.
In terms of changing schedules, I don't quite know yet. So yeah, like I wouldn't know what necessarily to change to. I guess less frequently would be the thing. Maybe give it a few more, like give it till Friday and see what things are like, and we'll revisit it. And then it gives me a
Okay,
bit more
yeah,
info over
sure.
because it's just been a few days so far where I've sort of gotten distracted by some stuff. So um, yeah, that's been sort of good, and it's felt quite good to get back into stuff again. I did notice that one of the differences between a lot of the thinking that I'm doing on sort of stuff more generally, the stuff that I'm like less like interested or passionate is probably the better word. I'm like less passionate about. That stuff I have like different habits around it. Like when the stuff that I'm like really interested in, I realized I've got like I have notebooks that I like take notes in, but I've got like notebooks going back years on a lot of this stuff, so particularly like blockchain stuff and Flux stuff, and it's quite different to a lot of the other things that I think about where I don't often take notes. Maybe like implicitly, or like I'll sort of like note down a few words or something, but not like thousands of words, sort of thing. Anyway, I noticed that this morning, and I thought it was sort of curious. Yeah, just in terms of subjects that I'm like I'd consider that I'm more knowledgeable about versus the stuff that's like when I'm like thinking more speculatively, sort of thing, like on topics that I don't know as much about. Yeah. Anyway, I thought that was sort of curious to note. So, in terms of the stuff at the end of last session, so I'm not convinced that all of the like I came up with some more questions and things to tease out. I called it like teasing out social dynamics. I'm not sure if they're all like unique or non-overlapping. I think some of it overlaps with some of the questions you've got, but they're like either inspired by stuff I spotted while reviewing some of the comments or some of the replies to that thread, or uh, from going through the where was it? Yeah, the social dynamic summary notes. So yeah,
Okay, that's
I don't
good.
think
I
it's
wrote some as
exhaustive, but
well. I wrote two separate checklists. One is concepts, and the other one is more specific things to look for.
yep, yep, that makes sense. One thing that I'm sort of annoyed that I didn't do particularly was in oh, that's the formatting test thread. In the uh, analyzing quotes objectively and socially, you've got both the objective meaning and social meaning, which I didn't do, and so comparing them wouldn't sort of make as much sense. I didn't get to comparing any of the analysis, though mine are like a bit longer. I also didn't focus as much on the stuff that we'd covered, so particularly like John's Wentworth and Tag. I didn't do theirs, but I did the other 3 replies. So we did talk about some of the like the Dagon stuff, but I don't think we talked about Donald Hobson, and we only touched on uh, Abram Densky, his reply.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I probably wrote some stuff that we didn't talk about for the stuff like Dagon's reply. Some stuff that we didn't talk about last time, but I'm not sure about that. The other thing I noticed was that a lot of this, so in the first, like with Donald's reply, I sort of went through it and looked for explicit stuff on like a deeper first pass. And then it took me actually sort of going back and considering things more contextually to find anything there. I don't think we actually talked about his reply, so that's sort of good in that it was more fresh. But then by the last one, I just did a first pass, and because I felt like it was reasonably detailed, I didn't bother doing a second one. So
Yeah.
it's sort of there's definitely like a bit of a mindset that you need to, or I feel like there's a mindset that I need to get into before I can like spot stuff. If I'm not looking out for it, or if I'm reading sort of at the wrong level, then it's really easy to miss.
Yeah, that makes sense. These things are designed for people to consciously miss them.
Mhm.
Like, they're not meant for people to consciously understand what's going on. You kind of have to look, unless you have a lot of practice looking, and then it gets more intuitive. They're
Yep.
meant to
Yep.
be, if you just go by intuitions, you're gonna not understand a lot of what's happening. But it still has meaning, it still affects people. Like, people pick up on vibes and stuff, even though they can't necessarily analyze it.
Yes. Yeah. One thing I did find curious is that I didn't expect to find a whole lot going through Hobson's reply for the second time. And then I feel like I can actually go through and maybe spot more again now. But I found a lot more than I expected, considering the first one. And a lot of it was that higher level, really difficult to, or more difficult to spot stuff, the more implicit stuff. He doesn't really, outrightly say anything. Like,
Yeah,
yeah. So I thought
you're not
it was a good
supposed to be
read
too
around.
overt with this stuff.
Yep.
Overt comes off like try hard and like aggressive and like you care too much.
Mm.
So the checklist helped. You're able to find more stuff
Yes.
using
Yeah.
it.
Well, particularly the what I ended up doing the second pass with Hobson was essentially like I had the checklist up on like a split pane like this, and
Yeah.
just went through like each one as I was reading like each paragraph and sort of skimming through the questions, looking for something that would be like applicable, and then seeing what it like how it applied. Um, yeah, there's also like I feel like a bit of uh maybe insidious is too strong a word, um, but I originally thought like Hobson's reply was not too bad because it seemed like he was putting in like a reasonable amount of effort, sort of thing, and I didn't really consider the tone nearly as much. Um, Sort of it's like you can put in a little bit more effort and it gives you a lot more credibility, sort of thing. But it gives you a lot more room then as well to put in other signals.
Yeah. I took his negatively immediately on my first reading. The John one that we talked about was the only one I took positively at all.
Yep. Yeah, he had
Okay,
the two outright lies to start with. Yep.
yeah, let's look at your new questions first. Who's making the conversation more basic while presuming they're correct? Acting like a teacher, being condescending. Ah, I see. So, yeah, making a conversation more basic like can potentially be a good or useful thing, like trying to find common ground, but it can also be acting like a teacher and be implying the other person doesn't know basic things, which can be taken as an attack, whether or not it's true.
Yeah, I had trouble wording this because like I sort of wanted to try and include the caveat that like it's good to make the conversation more basic when you're trying to find like common ground or figure out what the other person's saying. Um, especially if it's like the what they've written is at a higher level of emergence where it's more abstract or whatever. Um, so it's very much like other question, or is it like question-based stuff where they're trying to go back to basics to like reason from first principles, or are they going back to basics to like explain something to you? And I feel like those are the two sort of like qualitative cases.
Okay, who's breaking rules and getting away with it? Yeah, that shows
So
high status.
um, there wasn't a particular example, I think, in the comments I analyzed, but Yudkowsky's reply that you added like at the top is an example of that, for example, where like his breaking rules in that he's censoring discussion, he's not explaining why, it's not it's not even a good reason, in that wouldn't you want like heavily downvoted stuff to stay there as like part of the record of the community? um, so that's one of the reasons I added that, but that was added when looking through the list. Your summary notes.
Yeah, rules are for people without power or friends in high places.
Mm.
Rules are for the masses. But if you're important enough, you can get away with whatever.
Yep. Particularly flaunting rule breaking can be a big relative social status thing.
Yeah, it's also rule breaking is like the opposite of compliance.
Yeah.
Means other people have to follow your rules, you don't have to follow their rules.
Yep.
Speaking on behalf of people, yeah, like putting words in their mouth.
So the two, or there was like that's one meaning, but the meaning that I was intending particularly there was so just trying to think. Uh with regards to Abram Dembski's thing, he uses like phrases like "we're well advised" or "we should do something" or that sort of thing. So another way, I think, the second to last point that I've got there, who's signaling virtue via group approval, e.g., we here think X, or something like that. That's sort of more what I was getting at, um, with that, as sort of like more like using a royal we, um,
Oh,
sort of
speaking on
thing.
behalf of the group, not on behalf of enemies.
Yeah,
Speaking on
yeah,
behalf of allies. Presenting yourself as the leader
yeah. Or
who's
like
popular.
authoritative enough to be able to, speak in those sort of terms without like, without, or it's like they're without needing to take ownership of the idea almost. It's just like this is sort of self-evident type thing.
Okay. Hedging specifically to misrepresent the other person's views. Do you have an example?
So not from the quotes, but when I added this, I was thinking about like Luli's comments, like maybe the assumption is that sort of thing, where
Ah,
there's
right.
yeah,
Okay. Misrepresenting the counterparty in general. Yeah, that makes sense. It's it gives you leeway to make them look socially worse or make yourself look socially better, as well as objectively better or worse. You can
yep.
be unfair when you do it.
So this I was thinking of particular stuff. Like one of the examples that ran through uh, all or most of the replies was the way that they injected probability. So they're misrepresenting what you're saying by like injecting probability in there, and that's also then sort of like signaling some group norms or some stuff acceptable to the group in general. Um, but it's misrepresentation ultimately, like using terms that you haven't introduced, that aren't necessary for what you've said.
They mean they're great for some reason. Okay, bragging.
Yeah, so like the guy who's like, I've given away 20 copies of the goal.
Yeah. Okay. Not admitting weakness, acting confident, admitting weakness, clarifying questions. Yeah. Past value. Fancy. Virtue signal. Group approval, we think X. We phrase things so they could not deny them later on. Yeah, do you have an example on this one?
So some of the stuff that we looked at with tag in my thread was a little bit like this. The like I feel like it sort of comes into play with a few of these examples though, where often where they don't mention like, you know, I think something is more like this. It's more like so when Adam Densky says like following the venerated method of multiple working hypotheses, we're well advised to come up with blah. And if you like tried to focus too much on like this method of multiple hypotheses, then he has an out to sort of say, you know, well, that's just like a rule of thumb or whatever, and it's not really what I believe. It's just a good thing, and I, you know, didn't think you knew about it type thing, or it didn't look like you knew about it, so I wanted to introduce you to something basic. There's like various ways to, uh, like after the fact, sort of defend against a criticism so that it doesn't make you look worse. It's just sort of like, you know, in the same way that you might um, uh, sort of simplify things for a child, or you know, not you, but as in like someone might simplify things for a child that's ultimately misrepresenting the situation. But if questioned about it, they'll just say like, oh, well, I was just doing it for their benefit, sort of thing.
The not putting forward ideas as their own beliefs is pretty common. Like you see it in academic writing where they're like, for Popper, X is true. And they're always writing about all these different views while not picking sides or asserting anything themselves.
Yeah. There was one reply that Mako Yas gave to me on, I think this was, yeah, on like I left a reasonably long reply to this like short story he wrote, just with my like thoughts that like I constructed along the way, and even like, you know, including stuff like a few paragraphs later, oh, I just noticed this thing that you'd like baked in there but wasn't explicit, stuff like that. So it's a bit messy, but I sort of like posted this because he pointed me to it and I wanted to give him some feedback. And I think like, yeah, down the bottom here, um, uh, I think it was this. Um, he says something like, um, it might be the other reply. Oh yeah, it makes me angry to see someone assuming moral realism with such confidence that they might declare the most important industrial safety project in the history of humanity to be a foolish waste of time. Um, so, uh, yeah, like I think like it's often seen negatively if you like put your views strongly, sort of thing. And I don't quite know how to deal with this situation because I feel like there's a bit of a conflict between like saying things that so that you're like not leaving outs for yourself so that you can be criticized, while also like not seeming like you're trying to be like overbearing or like acting like you're perfect and the other person doesn't get something. Um,
Which project is he talking about?
AGI.
AGI is a safety project? Or does he mean safe AGI?
I presume like safe AGI is part of it. I think so this, I mean, he quotes one word, which is like, how useful is that? Um,
Yeah. The other thing about his paragraph is he's saying like moral realism is dangerous because you could decide that this project is bad, but you could also declare it bad if you were not a moral realist. You could say morality is objective, and in my morality, it's awful. Like, there's nothing about objective morality that causes the problem he's complaining about.
So is moral realism not the same as like morality being objective?
Yeah, that's the same, roughly.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Right, so if morality is subjective, you could also declare something a waste of time. It's
Yes,
even
yeah, yeah.
easier to, because you don't have to have an objective reason.
And moreover, no one can hold you to account then. Like, I
Yeah,
think it's really important to like claim that like things we believe morally are true beyond ourselves. Because if they weren't true beyond ourselves, how could we possibly like have any knowledge with reach? How could we make a decision that we can convince someone else was the right decision? How can we judge others by their actions? Like, it just leaves so many doors open. And so at the very least, you have to like specify your own morality, um, like in a somewhat objective way, in at least a specific way, something that you can hold yourself to. But if you claim that, or you allow the claim that like it doesn't apply to anyone else, then how do you argue that sort of thing? So I don't know if I've typoed this. He's quoted like risible, um, but I put like with an I, but yeah, so he's actually like he must have like typed this. I don't know, it doesn't even look like it's a British spelling.
uh-huh.
Maybe. Um,
Yeah, people often type their quotes. I'm not quite sure why they don't prefer copy paste, but it seems pretty common.
I mean, Wiktionary just says it's a misspelling. Um,
That
yeah,
might
no,
be part
I
of why the quotes are so short.
yes, yeah. Um, the the only real case where I type quotes, I did it once in writing this post. There was something short where yeah, excess capacity means. So like I quoted you saying that, and it was just that I figured that I could type 3 words faster than going and copying pasting a particular thing. Um, but if there's anything substantial, then copy paste is the only way to go. But yeah,
Okay, should we look at my checklist first or at your analysis?
let's go through your checklist. Since we've been talking about that, see what I can add.
Okay.
So I feel like there's a few of the categories that you've mentioned there. There are questions that I've got in the list either from yours or mine that like address part of it, but I'm not sure like because like my stuff isn't framed as categories, I'm not sure if it addresses all of it.
Mm-hmm.
I guess an exhaustive list might be a bit difficult, but yeah, I'm trying to think of whether there's stuff that that I've sort of forgotten, important factors that I've forgotten that come under some of those categories. Congruence is actually one that I think I don't have any questions about, in terms of their thing. So maybe like a question about that might be like who's acting like they're consistent when there are inconsistencies. So like a thing there, I point out in some of these, like contradictions, and particularly when they, like there's a few times when people contradict themselves, like oh, that's the examples one. So like when Dagon sort of contradicts himself here, but acts like it's consistent. I'm not sure if that's maybe one of the ways that congruence can come into things.
Yeah, there's some lack of congruence there. The term often comes up with things like body language, where people try to present themselves as something they're not, but then they give off various signals, and so there's contradictions.
Yep.
Like if you say you're a player but you sound nervous, that's not congruent.
Yep, and therefore low status.
Yeah, to be congruent, you need your explicit actions, your conscious decisions, the words you choose, etc., to match your internalized habitual autopilot stuff. It's getting your emotions and your unconscious stuff and whatever in line with what you're doing on a conscious level. And when those mismatch, that's how people catch a lot of faking. And when they seem to fit with each other, then people will generally believe you. Did you read the text or just the checklist?
Oh, I've just read the first paragraph now.
Okay. The next paragraph is just overlap examples.
Yeah, I found, I mean, both with the analyzing lies exercises and with this, that it feels like there's a fair amount of overlap with a lot of stuff. So like reframing and projecting expertise are two like things where there's a lot of overlap, plus the condescension as well.
Yeah, I came up with the main categories being effort, value, and maybe popularity, which is arguably value.
Yeah, it's a particular type of value though that feels like a bit more specific, in that there's like a delegation of value, as opposed to like, I have value because I have a expensive car. It's like I have value because other people think I have value. So it's like it's a type of value with like more reach, socially, or at least
Yeah,
sometimes.
part of popularity is having social skills and knowing how to fit in with people and get along with them, which it fits under value in that it's skills and knowledge and stuff, but it's a fairly notable category.
Mm.
Similarly, having a lot of social media followers is a type of popularity that fits under value pretty clearly.
Yeah, yep. So I guess reactivity, is that a bit of a combination of effort and value? Like reactivity sort of involves reframing the debate a bit sometimes, like making the other person react to what you're saying instead of reacting to what they're saying. So that sort of covers value, and then but it's like method is often like via least effort type stuff.
I see reactivity as being under effort. When you are reacting to someone, you're expending effort.
Yeah, okay.
So it's like a chasing behavior of doing what they want instead of getting them to do what you want. So effort is being directed according to their lead instead of your lead. And it shows your that you're not like stable, you don't have it all together. You're not just effortlessly having the life you want. You have to put effort in. You're insecure, you're trying to strive. Like striving is socially bad and fits in the effort category. I mean, it is
Yep.
related to value because if you already have a lot of value, then you don't need to put in effort. Or, a lot of the reason people exert effort is because they don't have enough value already and they're trying to get more value. So they are connected.
Yeah. Compliance would come under effort as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just thinking about uh effort and because it feels like there's some edge cases, but as I was going through this example, I'm thinking about Elon Musk. I mean, he's interesting in that he's got a style of speaking that isn't particularly polished, but it sort of comes off as endearing. He's doing these big projects and working really hard, but it comes off as like easy for him. So even though I don't know, works 6-day weeks or whatever, and 12-hour days or something, it's like he can effortlessly do a rocket company and a car company and like a or medical tech company. Um, it's sort of interesting because there's some things that would be like contradictory for like people of lower status to do,
Yeah, so there's a
but
bunch of
he
things
pull it
going
off.
on. One is whether something counts as effort is not judged by logic. It's judged by social rules, which consider things like, do you want to do it? And is it entered into public evidence? Or is there plausible deniability? So, like, some of the stuff that happens behind the scenes, you could logically infer that it happened, such as a woman spending a bunch of effort on her hair and makeup, but you're not socially allowed to bring it up and mention it and point out that she tried so hard, in general. That's, like, pretty prohibited and rude. So, it doesn't count as effort because it's not entered into the evidence in the social conversation.
Yep. The social conversation about Musk is like very much a like it sort of dreams that is spending all day designing rockets on some blueprints or something or other, as opposed to like dealing with shareholders and all the other crap that you need to do running multiple companies or being involved with multiple companies like he is.
Yeah,
The sort of
with
yeah,
with him, I think a lot of the work is seen as glamorous. It's seen as what he wants to do rather than what he has to do.
yeah.
It's seen
There's
as
a
high
fighting the good
status
fight,
work.
sort of. Yep,
It's like
yep.
if you see a pop star do a concert, people don't think, "Oh, I just saw her do 2 hours of work."
No, no, they don't. There's sort of a romanticism applied to all that.
And they certainly don't think, "I just saw her do 2 hours of work that she did 20 hours of practice for, so that she could get it right on the first try because she was doing it for a live audience instead of for a recording with editing. So just for the benefit of us audience people, she put in all this extra work."
Mm.
With Musk, there are other factors. Like, I don't think he works as hard as he presents, and I don't think he's as competent or knowledgeable or effective or any of that as he presents. I think a lot of it is he puts a lot of effort into putting on a show.
Yeah. Well, he's definitely like very good with social media. Um, I mean, I imagine that in general he's probably better at managing like production stuff than other people, in that otherwise he must have like, pretty good people around him, sort of thing.
I
Just in
wouldn't
terms
be
of,
confident of that because he gets a lot of money from the government. And so it's possible that a lot of his skill is regarding getting government favors and stuff like that.
yeah. So I was more, um, so I think I mean, that's definitely something that people don't take into account. Um, but my thinking on like of that point was, I think, more based on uh, like he's got competitors in the rocket business and in the car manufacturing or battery manufacturing business, and it seems like he's been able to do things that those competitors can't. Um, the car stuff maybe less so, in that there's a lot of like not glorified stuff, like improvements that like Toyota have made and stuff like that, decades ago. Uh, but at least there's this perception that he's doing stuff other people can't. The rocket stuff is probably a better example, but I don't know. I don't really know enough about that to judge it. Maybe it's simply that he's just more, like, A, it's not bureaucratic, it's not NASA, and B, he's just way more public about it. Like, other companies don't post the sort of stuff he does.
Yeah, so he works with NASA and the government, in my understanding. I think most people like you, and me as well, have not carefully looked into the details to see exactly how much competence is there or not. How, most people aren't actually checking how good it is. He just puts on a show. It's possible that
Yeah.
he managed to hire a bunch of competent scientists and stuff, and they're doing a good job. I don't know. A lot of people
Well, I
seem
mean,
to get the impression that he's like a genius personally at the actual topics he's dealing with,
yeah.
which I
I think
find fairly implausible because of some of his ideas being dumb, like the Hyperloop stuff.
yeah. Also, so there was a point like 2 years ago where I watched like Blue Origin and SpaceX gave a presentation like reasonably close to each other. I think it was to do with moon-based stuff. And one of the issues that I'd always had with SpaceX was this obsession with Mars. And while it does make sense to like build colonies and stuff on other planets, the vast majority of like humans living in space are going to live in space habitats. Anyway, and Bezos, like on the first presentation that I'd heard him speak about anything, um, mentioned this. And so I was like, immediately uh, like way more in favor of Blue Origin than I used to be, because I, thought he was taking into account ideas that he should be, as opposed to this like Mars stuff, which is, I think a bit of a distraction. Um, anyway, yeah. Musk seems, I think he gives off the impression that he's super capable. Like he just went and studied a bunch of like rocket books and then was like, sweet, I'm gonna do a rocket company, and then like made that happen. Um, but he's been doing that for more than 10 years, so he's evidently gonna be pretty knowledgeable about it by now. But there's this story or narrative about like, oh, I just went and studied it, and then a month later I was ready to start a rocket company, sort of thing. That's the impression that's sort of given out, even if it's not explicitly said.
Yeah, by the way, he doesn't only have links with the US government. He has links to other ones too, including the Chinese Communist Party.
Oh, okay. I'm well. He doesn't make much of a point about that.
Yeah.
Um, is that particularly with SpaceX, or because I know China's pretty like insular with their space program.
I
I
don't
could
think
see.
so. I'm not positive.
Um, yeah, no. So I mean, this is the first article that came up on Google, and this is like what, 4 days ago, 5 days ago or something.
Right.
So I'm not sure what it's about, but yeah, there seems to be some stuff at least.
Okay, so some more concepts you can think about in the next paragraph as well, and then I get into the more concrete checklist.
Yep. Um, yeah, I feel like most of these we've either discussed in part or come under other stuff, but it's there's a lot more than I've sort of explicitly considered. In my questions. So attacks on value.
Yeah, that's a bit broad, but you can look for like insulting someone, calling them incompetent, anything that implies their low social status, low value, low skill.
Does does Mako Yas's thing sort of come under this? I don't think that any of the first tier replies to you were well, maybe tag, I can't remember. But of the ones I analyzed, I don't feel like there was anything particular there.
No, they
But I'm
definitely
not sure
did this. For example, the guy who called Zor exotic was calling me incompetent and unfamiliar with or and Zor and so on. So that was an
Yeah,
attack
okay.
on my skill level.
Yep. I think I partially misread that as like attacks on values, as opposed to like value in the more general sense that you've got it in the list above.
Oh, yeah, no.
Yeah, no, the even modding exotic things like implication or XOR, which yeah, just comes off as so like condescending and ridiculous. Oh, helpfulness. That's something I didn't. I sort of maybe mentioned. Where was it? There was a thing about. Oh yeah. So it's like they're making the conversation more basic for the benefit of the other person, not the benefit of themselves. But I haven't like explicitly mentioned it. But yeah, who's acting like they're helpful, or like doing you a favor?
So that's a different dynamic than I meant. Yeah, acting
Oh,
like you're
okay.
doing someone a favor or like being condescending is a social dynamic. But what I had in mind with helpfulness is it's putting in effort. Like if you're actually trying to help someone and you put in effort, it's like a type of compliance. It's you coming to them and doing work for them.
Yep, like subservience almost.
This is one of the reasons social dynamics screw up conversations, is if you try to be really helpful and put in a bunch of work to make the conversation go well, you look low status. And then if the other person doesn't reciprocate, they look high status.
Yeah. So there's like just thinking about that. So there's like a social incentive to uh like there's a social incentive, there's a personal social incentive against like the objective good of the conversation.
Yeah. Because socially you're sort of supposed to maneuver to get other people to do work. But for a rational, productive conversation, you should like want to put effort into it to learn things and make it work well.
Yeah, your posts on the like rationally resolving discussions feel like they come to mind a bit here. Um, in that it's sort of like, I guess there's a bit of an element of like, oh, you should just know these things, or like every rational person already agrees we don't need to be explicit about them, or something like that. I don't quite know. Yeah, how people defend against it most of the time, but yeah. I mean, if they admitted that they didn't have these methods and it would be good to, then they're like essentially giving social status to someone who's like potentially a stranger or an outsider or things. There's like a sense of like betrayal of the group, uh, which I think we've got in other stuff like conformity. Yeah, So one thing that I do sort of have, or like, I guess maybe there's a bit of a conflict with, um, so like the paragraph you've got there under your list, understanding social dynamics involves thinking about why someone said something and the purposes they're trying to accomplish. Um, the conflict is about like what people do subconsciously. So, for example, when in your essay on lying, there's like two things that you point out. One of them is like you can explicitly lie, where you say something that you know is false, and then there's like being dishonest, where you like misrepresent yourself as knowing something that you know you don't know, or that you know you don't know enough about, or things like that. Um, it seems like
Okay.
that's a bit of a parallel to this, in that there's stuff that people do deliberately for social dynamics. And I mean, a flag for that might be that someone's like thinking about how to word something for a long time so that it's like particularly well received or something like that. Like pandering, sort of thing. Um, but then there's a lot of stuff that people do that they don't even realize. And one of the things about the second dishonesty case is that there's this element of like you should have known better, or you should know that this is misrepresenting yourself, that you don't actually know enough about it, or that you're like excluding things deliberately or whatever else. In the subconscious social dynamics case, uh, and I mean, I feel like this is like some social dynamic stuff stuck in my head, but it feels a bit like unfair or mean or cruel or rude or something like that to analyze what people are saying and be critical of stuff that's subconscious. Does that make sense? Um,
Yeah.
it feels, yeah, it feels like generally people disapprove of it, and sometimes it feels like it's being unfair on the person to analyze stuff so, uh, like in such detail.
So I think that it's really important because they do the majority of their social dynamics based on autopilot, intuition, etc. once they're past childhood. Like they become a certain type of person who does social dynamics, they create that, they practice it, and then it becomes automatic. And then they say, oh, it's just habit, it's autopilot. Like I'm not guilty, I didn't consciously intend that. But they are that kind of person. They do that. That's what the software in their brain does. And they put it there. Even if they hadn't put it there, it would still be who they are. And it's controlling their actions, so you have to deal with it. If they don't want people to dislike them for who they are, they need to change who they are. If
Yep,
they're like actively changing, they could ask for some leeway. Like that would be reasonable.
yep. Um, I guess in the extreme case, the conflict is sort of butts up against this idea of whether like sort of stuff like how much we should expect of ourselves. Um, so like I'm becoming and want to be more conscious about like when these sort of memes are expressed. Um, but you know, it's sort of unreasonable to expect that I'm never going to express this sort of stuff. Um, I guess there is an element of like if they just said like if I posted 500 words and there was like one sentence that was like had some social stuff in it, that's a lot better than these what do you call it, the like things that I've analyzed where I've been able to write like a few hundred words at least on each post. Um,
Yeah, mistakes happen, especially culturally normal mistakes. So if it's not too common, it's not the dominant theme in the conversation, people can forgive you. And there are things that make a big difference. Like if someone points it out to you, do you say, "Oh, my bad, sorry, I take it back," or do you say, "You're grasping at straws, you're making things
mm,
up, that didn't happen, the vibe's not there, you're misreading the situation, you're paranoid," and like double down on the social and be mean about it. Like those, what sort of reaction you get if you complain about it a little bit makes a big difference to what the experience is like for someone.
yep. That makes me think of another question, which would be not that it's necessarily come up in the stuff we've analyzed, but like who's evasive when confronted about like social dynamics and their behavior. In that like evasiveness or defensiveness or stuff. I mean, defensiveness can be like low status, so they might not get like necessarily defensive, but they might attack you or like evade the question with stuff like, you're overthinking things, that this isn't anything to do with the conversation, sort of thing. Which is not like explicitly as defensive as like, that's not true, you're making it up, sort of thing.
Yeah. That kind of reaction would be a sign that they don't have conscious control over their social dynamics. They don't have a good conscious understanding of what's going on. They're just a product of their culture. They're socially normal. They are, if it looks like they're doing a socially normal thing, you should just expect them to be guilty, like it fits.
Yeah, yep.
Backing up slightly, I don't think it's super important to differentiate social behavior that's conscious or autopilot or a mix. When I analyze, like, it's hard to tell. It's there's not usually good evidence about whether it's conscious or not, and it doesn't make that much difference. They are a certain type of person, they act a certain way, regardless of like which of their traits is causing it. That's who they are, that's how they're going to act, that's how the conversations go. It's the same with non-social dynamics. Like if we're having a logical discussion, and they get it really good or really bad, either way, if it's conscious skill or autopilot, doesn't matter that much to me. This is the sort of output they make when they try to do logic.
Yep. That makes a bit of sense. I haven't considered the idea of like non-social dynamic sort of stuff, and I guess the parallels between that and just normal thoughts and operations and reasoning. But that sort of makes sense. It doesn't matter if someone, can do maths well on autopilot or consciously. If it's good coming out the other side, it's good, and if it's bad, it's still bad. And they should, take responsibility or want to fix it or whatever else as appropriate, regardless of whether it's autopilot or not.
Yeah. Okay, so we went through those. And now we have the LW replies. Donald Hobson. Okay, second pass.
Yeah, so particularly one of the things, because I realized I didn't spot anything, it was almost like immediately obvious that I needed to, like, I was thinking of like conclude, like there was a I guess like an intuition that I should just conclude that it was okay because I didn't spot anything the first time I looked. And I thought that was, probably a bit short-sighted if I did that. Yeah,
That's good.
sort of like, yeah, not seeing something is a red flag that, yeah, you're not seeing what's actually there. And if there wasn't any social dynamics there, then you could put it under great scrutiny and it would still pass.
This sentence is confusing. He's expecting a reaction from me, so would react with "tell me why I'm wrong" to him.
Oh no, sorry. That's like his expectation is expressed through like things like "tell me why I'm wrong."
Oh, okay, I got it.
Sorry, yeah. So throughout this, I'm not sure I ever refer to you as like he or indirectly. Like whenever I talk about your stuff, I try to like keep your pronoun like always, proper noun, like always your name as part of that thing. Because I don't really like, it's not about what you were saying, right? It's about what they were saying. And I figured that switching subjects would just make things confusing.
Yeah, I didn't find his comments very useful in general, and I didn't think they engaged with me very well. To some extent, he's just saying his own thing instead of trying to understand, like, the Goldratt stuff.
One thing I'm not sure about the order of posts, but this whole like conjunctive, disjunctive thing is just repeated. I think three of the replies mention that sort of thing, and they don't reference each other. Like no one read the comments before making a comment. It seems like they all feel like they're telling you something new when they mention it.
Yeah, I remember two of them wrote about it, not super far apart in time. Hobson. You can get exact times if you hover.
Yeah, they don't.
Hobson and Dembski guy both brought it up near each other.
Oh, did you get no replies to the bottleneck examples?
Yeah, correct. Generally, yeah, I wrote 3 more Goldratt posts and I got no substantive engagement from anyone.
Yeah, it sort of indicates how much investment they had, or how much interest they had in actually.
Yeah, Abram Dembski was the only person who responded later, and it was after like a week delay or something. And he wrote 2 hostile comments on one of my posts. And I think that was it total. Let's see. Yeah, see, 0 to 0 when I tried to write more Goldratt stuff.
Yeah,
And those
and
2
then
are like a week late reply from Abram Dembski, who was not at all friendly.
what's more, out of the comments you get like, John Wentworth saying like, explicitly good things, and then Dagon essentially saying explicitly good things about, the goal in general, but by implication sort of that there was something good about your post. And I think Donald has this, is it Donald? Or no, maybe it's Abram Dunsky, there's like, oh yeah, I can agree, and then it's closer to blah, which is a silly thing to say anyway. But so you've essentially had 3 people say that there is something good about this. In the first thing, and then literally nothing afterwards as you expand on it, which I
Yeah.
feel like is pretty disingenuous.
Have you seen this? I wrote a whole post of comment replies to people. This is after the examples post, which was essentially a reply to John. Then I wrote direct replies to these people, and they didn't want to talk with me.
Did you message them or like mention them in the thing?
Yeah, I replied to them in comments in the first one
Yeah, okay. So they
with
definitely
the
knew about
link.
it, sort of thing. It wasn't just
Yeah.
yeah, um, like not getting a notification or something. Um, yeah.
Okay. Oh, one of the things I did in that post is I demonstrated that I can math because 2 people's response was I don't think you can math. And so if that was like honest and straightforward, it would imply if you really can math, I would be interested in your argument or talking with you or something. Like why would you bother to say I don't think you can math and like put up this challenge or obstacle unless a solution to it would make a difference to you and mean you're interested or something. Right? It's not fair to challenge someone in response to their post. And then if they pass the challenge, you're going to ignore them.
Yeah. Well, it means that the point of the challenge wasn't for you to like. It wasn't about the challenge. It was about like being seen to post a challenge or whatever else.
Yeah, I
Um,
think they just wanted me to fail. They just wanted to attack me and win and be done.
yeah. So you're explicitly here like dealing with like both probabilities and logic, and presumably these sort of things count for people as like conjunctive, disjunctive, and combinations. no one's at this point, like, everyone was quite happy to explain that you didn't take this into account, and then as soon as you specify it in a way that does take this into account, no one's interested in the conversation anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think they can't math and they were posturing to some extent.
So
But
that's
yeah, I did a bunch
oh
of
yeah.
signaling that I can math, I can do less wrong things, and no one wanted to talk with me about it after doing that.
Mm. I think at that point it's well, I guess part of the thing as well is now that you've like passed the challenge or like demonstrated that you're at least willing to take it on, uh, there's this element of like, well, I mean, one of the things they might think is like, oh, now that you've expended this effort, it shows that you're low status enough that I don't have to like bother replying to you or whatever else because, well, because low status, which is like completely not rational, um, but sort of makes sense in the social dynamic sense.
Yeah, I also did math in this Solomon induction post, and no one engaged with the math at all. That was one of the things, because I got a bunch of comments, but no, there was zero engagement with the math. I don't know if anyone followed it. I don't know if anyone checked it was right. Like, I don't know if they can do it, but no one engaged with math.
Yeah,
And
the sort
like,
of like
I didn't think
fake
this was
math.
very hard math. I wasn't trying to make it hard or anything.
No, I mean, there's nothing like you've got what addition, exponentiation, and length. Are there any other like functions or concepts in there? Oh, there's an or. Like, I mean, it's yeah. I would expect like first year computer science students to not have a problem with any of this.
Oh, I don't
Like
agree
on
with
day
that.
one.
It's like, it's too much stuff. You just look at it and people are like, oh my god, that's so many symbols, I'll never figure it out, and they give up.
Part of it might be as well, it's like I'm not sure how people would think about this, but because it's not formatted as an equation, like it's not like in a nice LaTeX thing, um, I think I might have seen, wondering whether there's, yeah, so like this. Um, uh, and apparently this is like able to be encoded in LessWrong posts or somehow because it's
Yeah,
what
they
do you
have
call it?
LaTeX support.
Um, So yeah, but then there's sort of this. There might be an element of like, oh, you haven't gone to the effort of putting it in LaTeX or whatever else, which is against a. Oh, there we go. Yeah, LaTeX. It's against community norms, sort of thing. Would be maybe one of the ways that that could be interpreted. Not that it makes the math any less wrong or any less readable, really, because it's all like
Yeah, this
there's just
this stuff did not require careful notation.
it's. I mean, what is someone going to complain that I was just trying to, I was like, oh, is there any ambiguity around the brackets here, whether it's
Yeah.
like brackets around that or, but it's actually the
All
same regardless.
yeah, the numerators are all one, so
Yeah, so it just falls out. And then the one case where you do need brackets, you've got them. So it's pretty boring. Um, yeah, there's no ambiguity there.
there's something wrong with the community, and there's like posturing, but they don't actually want to talk details when they have the opportunity. Like, how often do they get a critic of Solomonov induction who can do math related to it that's not wrong? And then none of
Yeah.
them are interested in that?
I wonder what the reaction would be to a post of like, uh, does anyone at LessWrong, like the title is just, does anyone at LessWrong want like decent criticism of or a debate on Solomonov induction? Um, and then I mean, make up a story or otherwise, but it's like something like, I've got this friend who's good at maths and they're critical, they dismiss Solomonov induction and they say that they'll debate anyone about it, but I don't know enough. Is anyone interested? Like if you put it like that and it was just that, what would the reaction be? Because if it's no reaction, I feel like it's pretty damning. Um,
You're welcome to post something along those lines.
I'd be really curious to see what happens, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll make a note of it. I wonder if it's too recent in people's history to like. Well, then again, I don't think people are really going to care that much. To like look at my post history or whatever else and try and figure out things, or that they've paid enough attention to notice that topic, which I
I
presume
think
didn't stay
just
on the front.
plain induction instead of solid induction is a better topic in general, anyways. It's like more important to talk about because you need to get into the more basic problems of like what is knowledge, what are the goals of induction, what are the requirements of a theory of induction for it to be a success. Like, you have to answer those questions before you can even debate Solomonoff induction as a like you can debate the math without those questions, but you can't debate does it work in context until you know what its goals are supposed to be.
Yes, yeah. No, I agree with that. I was thinking, one of the things that I was thinking yesterday or this morning, I can't remember, was that like I mean, the uncomputability of Solomonoff induction aside, I can sort of buy that it's the optimal way to like predict stuff in an environment where you know absolutely nothing and can't learn anything and can't take stuff like knowledge between problems. Like if you can't improve on knowledge or you can't like build up ideas and base ideas on other ideas, um, then I feel like it makes a lot more sense. But of course we can do that. So there's sort of like this question of why is it useful? Moreover, if like the idea that like induction can be like optimal for finding knowledge in a situation like that, that's not really relevant in terms of what's optimal in a situation where we can like incrementally build up ideas. Um, because that's not even, as far as I can tell, that's not even like dealt with. Um, like there maybe like bridging hypotheses come into something like that, but I don't know enough about it. But it feels like yeah, it's like it's claiming to be optimal, but it's assuming literally no context, and that it's optimal with literally no context, which sort of feels a bit pointless.
Well, the premise is that you have full context. Like you have an agent, and then you feed in absolutely all data the agent has as the inputs, and you get out your predictions.
Yeah, I was looking for so one thing I did find is I looked at some. Oh, I've been quite annoyed by LessWrong's like documentation of Solomonoff induction, and Wikipedia is pretty useless.
Oh
Um,
yeah, it's terrible.
but I did find a paper by, it might have been by this Australian guy. There's an Australian guy who comes up occasionally. Or sorry, he's not. I'm not sure he's Australian, but he works at an Australian uni. Um, anyway, and they do actually in the general formulations they do take like alphabets of potential instructions. Like it's not just binary. They do consider like alphabets that, or they call them alphabets, but like essentially like data units or like individual digits type thing that not necessarily like ordered or anything, but that correspond to say particular actions or stuff like that. Um, and this sort of thing feels like pretty crucial for anyone who was like trying to understand it. Like the binary thing just feels like simplifying stuff for kids. And then when they figure out that they've been lied to, you're like, oh yeah, there was actually all this other stuff, but I just hid it from you because I didn't think you were smart enough for it. Sort of thing. And there's other details like whether the programs take inputs or not, that I have no idea, and I can't find much documentation talking about it. Um,
Yeah, LessWrong has a bit of a vibe of we're the experts, we will condense some information for the public to help them, but they don't honestly fully expect the public to participate at an expert level.
feels a bit like pop science sort of thing, in that it's like we've distilled this for you, and this is all you need to know. Don't ask any more questions. But yeah, one thing that got me as well about everyone's replies is they bring up this like conjunctive. Is it conjunctive or disjunctive? I think this one is where it's like an or. Um, like your topic is particularly talking about an idea and then sub-ideas within that. And everyone seems like they really want to bring up the case where you've got like multiple different ideas, and not deal with the fact that like each one of those has a bottleneck and a weakest link. It's anyway, I didn't mention that as like a reframing,
Yeah.
particularly in what people are doing, but it seems really common.
There were a lot of things, like none of them engaged with what I was actually saying. And
Hmm.
like the actual thing my post was about was challenging like their basic philosophy, and none of them seem to know that. And they're just like, you didn't deal with a more complicated case. And it's like, yeah, I started with a simpler case first. Like, that's kind of what their responses were, is there are more complicated cases. I'm like, right, could we try to agree about the simpler case first? The and case, or just a chain, and then we can modify the model later if it's worthwhile, and then we'll find out it doesn't make that much difference.
Yeah. I feel like it's a bit damned if you do, damned if you don't. Maybe you could like mention, it's a bit pandering, but like mention that like, oh, there are more advanced cases, but I want to focus on this particularly now. I think there are like legit reasons to do that. Like for example, if you had like a two-step legal process, then there's no point like, you know, making long arguments about both steps. Just make a long argument about the first step, and then just like whether, you know, depending on how someone responds, you then figure out what to do for the second one. Uh, I mean, it applies here too. The same reasoning applies here. In that if people don't agree on the simple case, then there's no way they're going to agree on the more complex case. So why bother putting stuff into it? But it's almost like you need to explicitly call out that, like, oh, there's lots more, you know, there's lots more complex stuff, but I want to particularly talk about this. And if you don't mention that, then not having complex cases is a criticism, even though they disagree with the simple case. It's sort of feels like a way to keep oneself from being pinned down, because it's like a general criticism that has nothing really to do with them, and they can sort of deflect and reframe without being too specific and make, you know, the other person look bad because they haven't done, you know, something that's apparently expected.
Okay, so let's look over the full reply. I think there's other stuff in it.
Yep.
So first sentence.
Oh, there's
What does the first half do?
yeah, so it's one of these like false concessions sort of thing. In that,
Yeah.
so first off, you're saying effect, which is watering down what you said, as opposed to just ideas can have a bottleneck. It's like, oh, there's something like that going on. So I didn't spot this when I read it either, which sort of surprises me now. But yeah, so there's like the false concession, and then there's this like qualifier. So the first half is like the introduction of the qualifier and this false concession, the watering down of what you said, and then the essentially like I guess a justification for why they've done that, because it's only an effect. So there's like, I've watered it down so that I can make this obvious to you because blah or whatever else. And just claiming there's other stuff going on. Even though, I mean, realistically, you're explicitly arguing against other stuff mattering in these cases. Like, it's like when you try and stretch the idea, when you know, apply the idea, there's going to be like, this is going to be the nature of the point of failure type thing. And this like false concession, the sort of ad hoc justification and the reframing that this does as well, then allows him to go off and talk about a whole bunch of other effects that are actually irrelevant, but it looks like he's you know, doing you a favor, or like, you know, explaining the stuff you've missed or whatever else, those sort of things.
Yeah, so it's a very weak agreement, followed immediately by a but,
Yeah.
followed by a you're missing stuff. Which is not actually fair because I never said it was the only effect. Like, this is a straw man. I said it's a particularly important effect that I want to talk about.
Yep.
So this is the thing I'm allegedly missing. Like, he doesn't literally say you don't know this, but he's suggesting it. Why else would he be bringing it up if I already knew it?
Yeah.
So now he launches into these details. The way he does it, like, this is messy, and I think it's a low effort. Like, he didn't edit this. He didn't try to write well.
No.
Like that
No.
joke, I wrote you a long letter because I didn't have time to make a short one. Like, it looks a little like that.
It's just like stream of consciousness. I mean, yeah, he's just
Anyway,
sort of like,
go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say he's just like mentioned a bunch of stuff that sounds a bit technical, and then like thrown in evolution, and it's like it doesn't matter that it's loose because everyone will agree with me anyway. It's not important type thing. Um, sort of going on. I'm not even sure if embryological is a word.
So I think he's wrong that these are in parallel. Like, if one of these lines of argument of evolution got refuted, you would
Yeah, it would be a
not
serious problem.
automatically expect the other ones to be fine. You'd be like, what the fuck? We have to rethink everything. This is shocking. We need
Well,
to
yeah,
figure
this
out
actually,
how did we get this wrong? Like, what was wrong with our model? What else is wrong too?
and so the good biologists out there who are, are willing to say stuff like this, they'll say, I'm pretty sure I've heard biologists say stuff like, if we found a chicken in the Triassic period or whatever else, like that would be a serious problem, sort of thing. Like they're explicitly, like one of the reasons that, they make the claim that evolution is so strong is that it only takes one counterexample in these things, and every place that we've looked, uh, if we think we find a counterexample, it later turns out that we didn't know enough. Um, like if genetics, if we were wrong about genetics, then that would be really, really serious. Um, if we found fossils from, in different periods that just couldn't have gotten there besides having died at the wrong time, like that would be really serious. And the good biologists like hold themselves to that. They're willing to claim that, like one out of place fossil is serious, and this guy's essentially watering all of that down. It just says like pointing towards. Which is, I mean, it's an inductive problem as well in that,
Yeah.
they think that, yeah, evidence points towards something. Well, it's almost empiricism.
Yeah, they're very evidence-based. They think the evidence supports the theory. They think we have so much evidence the theory is super supported. So if you like knock out some of the support, it'll still be fine. Um, these things are not independent, like he thinks. And yeah, like if our understanding of genes was wrong, we wouldn't be like, oh well, we still have these other reasons to believe in evolution. Like,
Yeah.
he's literally presenting this as if you could say, if any one of these is correct, then the conclusion is the full theory of evolution as currently understood, and we can delete 3 of them with no changes. Like, we'll just have
Yeah.
only the fossil record and throw out all our understanding of genes and embryos and bacteria, and it'll be fine.
There is like, I mean, one of the so I don't want to defend him, but in terms of what he might be thinking, I feel like there is a sense in which if you just removed the rest, if we didn't get like contradicting evidence, but you just removed the rest, like the fossil record can't, like it's not specific enough and broad enough to provide all the knowledge that we have on like evolution now. Particularly getting into stuff like epigenetics or the way that like, there's these weird subtleties or stuff like selfish genes, like fossil records can't explain that. They can't explain like sexual selection necessarily. We've got this long changes over time. There's like one of the things about evolution is that like there was a good century between when it was proposed and when we like understood genes at a decent enough level to be able to like really start tying them together. Um, it's like it was significant. Like yeah, our understanding of genes was really significant in our understanding of evolution, just like our like expansion of fossil records and continuing to find more fossils. and all the problems that that's come up with, like squirrels' knees and particular weird things that we don't necessarily know how to explain off the bat. Like some animals developing wings, like not looking like they should have been useful halfway, and like why does that happen? Like all of that stuff has expanded our knowledge, but none of these things can provide all of that. Or rather, all the things, it's not that those bits of evidence have expanded our knowledge, they've provided like criticisms that are like orthogonal enough with the other criticisms to mean that we've been like backed into a corner with what evolution has to be and has to look like. And we have a far more specific theory than like Darwin originally put forward because of that. Because we've been able to like
Yeah.
find a way to make it fit.
So I think a reasonable way to represent it is if all four arguments are true, then we get the modern theory of evolution with all the details. We've found ways to use all the evidence, and now we need all of it because we found the ways it was useful. We made our conclusions depend on all the evidence. We didn't find the like minimal subset or like lowest common multiplier or something of the evidence and base our theory on that so that we could get it from any of the separate pieces of evidence. We took like the most we could infer from our evidence. If all of our evidence is correct, what could we infer? So we need all of it, so it's an and thing. And this is one of the reasons that and chains are common and important, contrary to the critic. So for him, for his view, you have to put it more like this. He's trying to say if any one of them is true, evolution. I think like evolution is doing double duty there, because it's not if any one then modern full theory, but debatably if any one of the four then weak minimal theory, which is pretty different.
Yeah.
And I mean even that is questionable, but
Yeah. One of the things that I just really, so I mean, evolution is actually not a bad way to sort of like look at it. I think it's stronger with cases like GR, like general relativity. But like Darwin had to think about a lot of stuff to like come up with like natural selection as an idea. And particularly, we have a corresponding alternative, which is like Lamarckian evolution, which arguably is way more inductive. Um, like it's I feel like there's this one of the really consistent errors that inductivists make is theories are either unconfirmed, like they're hypothetical or whatever else. So like modern world, many worlds they'd call like unconfirmed or something, or they have so much evidence that of course we believe they're true because we can do it via induction, and they'll include like evolution and general relativity and stuff in that, completely ignoring that like for general relativity, most of our evidence for it came 60 plus years after the theory was produced. Evidence for it. Yeah, as in our ability to like compare it to other theories, that evidence came 60 years later. For evolution, like, I mean, there was like looking at animals was what Darwin could do. Fossils were really, really sparse sort of thing at that point.
yeah.
Archaeology was not really developed. It was only after that that we went and tried to find all this stuff because we knew how important it was then. Anyway, I mean, this sort of argument is, I mean, it's in the first chapter of BOI, I think. Like, but yeah, I just don't.
Yeah, so FYI,
Mhm.
Eliezer Yudkowsky, an inductivist, is a big MWI fan and wrote a bunch of articles about it.
How does he possibly think that? Like,
You can read the articles; they're okay.
yeah, okay.
Some of them I think are good. Like it's mixed, but yeah, some of it I think he has good points, and he understands quantum realism in a reasonable way, and that MWI is quantum realism, and we can't, the Copenhagen and the collapse is stupid and ridiculous, and so on. And he managed to get there.
Um, that's really interesting though, because I mean, most people. So the best evidence that I think we have, so besides like just interference itself, the best evidence I think we have for, just as far as I know, for MWI is quantum computation, in that we can have so many like operations happening that you just couldn't physically fit them in the entire lifespan of a single universe in a classical computer. And that's with like, hundreds or thousands of qubits. Um, So those operations have to be happening somewhere. You know, we're not producing so much energy that, you know, our universe detonates, so it's not happening, not all happening here. Most people don't include this as evidence for like many worlds, which I think is sort of a bit ridiculous because I don't think there is another explanation. But I mean,
Yeah,
that
I
stuff
don't
came.
believe he brought that up. I don't think he needed that to reach the conclusion.
So what possible evidence does he think he has on that then? I mean, just the
Like
silliness
quantum
of the whole
physics
theory?
itself. I think it's essentially that we did experiments and we found out quantum physics is right. So that's our evidence for MWI, which is what you get when you take the math and what we learned seriously and don't add arbitrary exceptions and crap.
Isn't taking theories seriously like not an inductivist thing? Like, don't they deliberately not take them seriously?
Yeah, I mean he does. He's pretty good about it. He's okay at it. So
Wow.
there, he's better than the typical like know nothing inductivist. He thinks about things sometimes. He talks about explanations and stuff sometimes. He has an article where he says you shouldn't use probability numbers that don't come from numbers. Don't make them up out of your ass. Like don't just make up stupid numbers to pretend that you're using probability theory. If you don't have a way to get something that actually uses calculations to result in a number, just use words like probably, maybe, I'm pretty sure. You know, like use things that represent your real uncertainty and lack of numericalness.
Yeah.
He thinks it would
No,
be
that seems.
better if we could use numbers for everything. He thinks we're like, you know, sort of not good enough and the AGIs will be better than us. So, I mean, it's kind of a mixed bag there.
Yeah. Um. All right. Where did we split off? We got a bit off track, but I was going to say I might take this opportunity to go to the bathroom. And I'll be back in a sec.
Okay. Regarding quantum
Okay.
physics, one of the things he says is quantum physics taught us that interactions between particles are important and have major consequences, like entanglement and stuff. And what the researchers did is they forgot that they and their measuring instruments were made out of particles. And this is how they got so confused. And so that's a reasonable way to approach it.
Yep. Well, I think roughly that's how MWI goes about it too, right? Like where you have these like weird paradox things. If you put yourself as part of the quantum system, then it sort of works out.
Yeah.
So I thought just while I remembered, one thing that I wouldn't mind talking about at some point. It doesn't have to be today. But I had some thoughts on SI the other day, and I ended up writing about like 2,000 words in this like tree, which is sort of meant to be read a bit like left to right. So everything's like sort
Uh-huh.
of maybe a bit less structured left to right in terms of breakdowns. Um, but yeah, and anyway, I had some problems with it. Particularly, I called it Solomon-off induction, and I think it was like here that Just I'll zoom out to make it obvious, like there. So 2/3 of the way along that SI actually shows up. Anyway, I had some other problems too. That yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that I'd like to talk about that at some point. So I felt like I didn't do a
Okay.
particularly good job.
Yeah, you could try to debate them about it yourself. Just if you do it, argue with them like somewhat sparingly and try to make each of your messages really good, so that if you sort of try your best, then criticism of it will have the most value for you.
Yeah, there's I could actually probably fairly easily. So the first parts of this tree, like one of the things that I like thinking about it now after writing it, like the biggest sort of early chunk is sort of like what's an intuitive way we could model ideas. And so I could write like maybe two posts on that without any introduction to Solomon-Off induction, and post those to like both LessWrong and FI. That might be a decent way to go about it. And that way as well, I'm not like triggering people too much on LessWrong to like, respond in like this person's a critical rationalist, so I'll say this type way. Yep.
Yeah, so Hobson does a bit of math that, like, it's a huge leap to think telling me this math was the thing that needed to happen next. Like, he has no information that I don't know this, or that this is like the right way to continue. Like, he's sort of taken a stab in the dark about how to continue the conversation and then run with it, and it's like a little insulting or condescending. Maybe more than a little, it depends on how high your standards are. Maybe he thinks this is like really tricky and he's very clever for knowing it. I don't know. But it's not a reasonable way to continue because he doesn't have enough understanding of like where I'm coming from and how we should continue. He's just jumping into a particular very like specific narrow thing. And the reason he's doing it partly is looking for your keys under the streetlight, even though you lost them in the dark. Like, it's easier for him to talk about this than to talk about the Goldratt stuff because he doesn't know the Goldratt stuff. But he wants to talk about stuff he's familiar with.
Yeah, like one thing that occurs to me about this, I mean, he just says that he's applying 50/50 there or whatever else. If I'm like wondering about black ravens, like saying that, this shoe is blue and then this umbrella is green and whatever else, these are all independent arguments. Like none of the arguments are refuted by like, or are damaged by refuting any others. But this conclusion would be totally ridiculous from those arguments.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little like he's advocating gish galloping, which is a thing they bring up all the time. It just means throwing too many shitty arguments at the other guy to overwhelm them.
Yep.
And anyway, so then he goes here, and his actual like talking about the issue part is very like brief and dismissive. He's just like, in one case it's weaker than the weakest link, and in the other case it's stronger than the weakest link. And by the way, he's totally missing the point. Like, a chain is not weaker than the weakest link, it's as strong as the weakest link. Because the other links are going to break first.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't understand the type of strength or weakness that we're dealing with.
The other thing there is just the, like, I mean, how does this ever make sense? That like arguments are weaker than the weakest link.
Because he thinks if one of the arguments has like a 40% chance to be right, and one has a 90% chance to be right, and you need both of them to be right, then the total probability is under 40. But he doesn't understand that I was talking about a different kind of model or situation.
Well, I think there's this assumption that maybe all the posters have made that weaker means less probable,
Yeah.
which is a big assumption, and you obviously didn't say it. And then not considering other stuff. I mean, particularly, you actually talk about like what weakness means in terms of capacity, and the ability for it to. Oh, I don't. Maybe I've got it further down, but
Yes, and then I got a response which was basically, what do you mean by capacity? Do you mean probability?
even though, yeah, no, oh my, yeah. So the one guy who actually asked about it, I think was Tag. The other guys just made an assumption, even though it was contradicted by the post. So
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was a real question from Tag.
no, which sort of makes it all the more sadder that that was possibly the best question that anyone asked.
Yeah, so then he goes back into more math that I already knew. And then he starts looking at resistors just to show off and show more fancy math because he knows resistor math.
Yeah, I didn't get why this was included at all. I mean,
Bragging.
is he talk? Is he? Yeah, even I mean, I guess like the resistors in series versus parallel feels like maybe that's what he's sort of talking about. But why would people be looking for a direct analog to resistors? Like he's
Because
just
they're really clever like him, and they see that there might be a direct analog to resistors. He's like, you've probably thought there might be a direct analog to resistors if you're a smart person who knows about resistors and knows what's going on really well here. However, I already investigated that for you. I'm a step ahead. There isn't a direct one, but there is a similar thing. It's like, it's bragging.
yeah. So I think I said something like that. Did I?
But yeah, this whole
Oh
thing
no,
was
I no, it's fine.
dismissive and it didn't try to engage with what I was saying. Like, he didn't engage with what my article is about, like, at all. He understood, like, none of it and he has no questions. He's not trying to learn something. He's confronted with a large inferential distance, and then his thing is just, oh, the problem is that you don't have my views. Let me work on fixing that. Starting with wild guesses about what you might not know without trying to find out. Okay, so
Yeah.
Dagon. Yeah, so he's giving off a vibe that he's sort of like Feynman, that he makes connection between things and he does math for fun and he's curious
Mm.
and he's like always thinking about things and noticing connections and stuff. Like, that's a high status sort of person to be, but he's
Yep.
faking.
So
Like
yeah, like
he's failing to engage with what I said and just going to something he's more comfortable with, even though it doesn't actually work.
um it feels like so he's identified like the ability to spot convergence as a high status thing, and he's trying to say that he's high status by pointing out that there isn't convergence, which is a funny thing to do because you could also say for those of you looking for a direct analog to traffic flow, there isn't one, or a direct analog to the way trees grow, there isn't one. Like you could.
Yeah. He thought of a bad example, but it was so clever he decided to use it anyways. And pretend that everyone else was trying to do it and just wasn't smart enough to figure out it didn't work. So they need the tip to save them time. Like, don't
Yep.
waste your time looking into this. I've already checked it for you.
So glad he saved me those 30 seconds. But yeah, no, it's so I feel awkward if I well, awkward is one way to put it. Maybe that's just the socially acceptable way of putting it. If I so I'm far more ready in text to acknowledge things that I say, like just then I use sarcasm, and I realized I did, and then started thinking about what I'm saying now. But yeah, I don't know if there's a good or a better way to handle that, than just yeah, I don't know. Usually, just pass over it sort of thing.
Yeah. If you think before you communicate enough, and you have like specific policies that you're pushing on yourself and doing on purpose, then you just do it for a while and it becomes more habitual, more second nature.
Mm,
Like with practice, You slow down, you practice the way you want it to be, and then you speed up again doing the new thing. This is a general learning pattern.
Yep. Yeah. I feel like I have done that. Well, sorry.
Yeah, doing retrospectives helps too, but doing it like in advance is preferable. But you can work towards catching it like soon after, and then like closer and closer. And the closer afterwards you can catch it, plus slowing down a little bit can get you there.
Yeah. I think maybe, yeah, slowing down might be. So I've like in the past, as part of uh like I've been against sarcasm for some time, uh like particularly stuff to do with like living without irony or living sincerely, like comes into that. But also that it's unclear, it's like a low form of humor sort of thing. It doesn't take much creativity, and rarely is it actually that entertaining. And so I have sort of like maybe I've adjusted quite a bit in that I use it far less than I did like 10 years ago. But I might have like sped up a bit too much and sort of yeah, forgotten to take it slower. And then just taken it for granted because, you know, it hasn't been nearly as much of an issue or whatever else. I think in general there's a reluctance to like feel like you're going backwards by like slowing down again or whatever else.
So, back to the previous guy. His answer to an inferential distance gap is just to assume the other guy is ignorant, which is not a reasonable way of working out what's going on.
No. I don't think it's even like logical in that if there's an actually a gap, then like talking about conclusions that you have that are like halfway up the, you know, inferential sort of tree, um, is not going to help anything. Like without finding the common point, then you can't actually really make any progress or figure out what disagreements are, because the disagreements like halfway down are going to be just as troublesome as the disagreements further up. Like what matters for both of them is that there's something like some component or something that they're reliant on, the ideas are reliant on, that, you know, there's a disagreement about. And so without actually addressing that, there's no way to actually make progress. And so dumbing things down or whatever, or like, you know, speaking simply or stuff like that is never actually going to, it might help like kids because they don't have that other thing. But if someone's got like solid ideas, then yeah, it's never going to help.
Part of what I wanted from them was, what part of what I said do you not understand? And then what they did was, let's talk about a different case you didn't write about, and then why it's more complicated and different. And it's like, okay, but did you understand the simpler case that I talked about? We haven't gotten that far yet. Because I don't think they did. And also, they're like talking down to me and trying to like fix me being wrong without pointing out any error I made. Like they're going into like this war stuff, but they don't have an error of commission. There's no sentence in my post that was incorrect. It's simply that I didn't discuss something. It's an omission that was unnecessary to, you know, you can talk about the case I talked about without talking about the other case. It's not actually wrong. They didn't find anything that was wrong, and then they assumed the problem is that I'm ignorant.
Yeah.
You know, you ought to read to the first error at least, and then say, here's an error, but with no errors, they're being very dismissive.
Yeah.
About Dagon, I don't know if Yossani knows more than Goldratt, because I read it somewhat as him saying, Goldratt's chain metaphor has limits. Goldratt would agree with me. You just don't understand Goldratt. Like, I thought it could have gone that way.
Oh, okay. Yep. I mean, I didn't think that made sense because I don't remember any points where Goldratt's like stated that there's a limit. I mean, this guy could still believe it for whatever
Yeah,
reason.
right. I don't think it makes sense if you read his books and understand them. Like, I don't think it's Goldratt's position, but I think
That doesn't mean he
Dagon might
understands.
not know that. I think Dagon thinks there's a limit, so he assumes Goldratt thinks there's a limit too.
Yep.
It's like these people who read Popper, and then whatever they come up with, they think, well, Popper was really smart, and I read his books and I came to this conclusion. It must be what Popper meant. I've
The
run into
transitive
that with,
property of the transitive property of stuff I agree with.
yeah. I've literally run into those arguments, like, Popper was smart, therefore he couldn't possibly disagree with induction. Like, stop insulting him.
Yeah, that's just also what the hell do they think uh there are really capable scientists who disagree about stuff. Do you just think that like half of them are stupid, like they just like fluked all their university exams or something and they're now working on string theory and publications for 30 years by luck? Like I don't know when it seems really weird that people don't take seriously the idea that like intelligent, knowledgeable people can legitimately disagree on like fundamental things. Um, yeah,
The social world suppresses disagreement, like you're supposed to fit into the group.
mm,
Okay, so the Dembski guy was more openly insulting than the Hobson guy while writing somewhat similar stuff.
yep,
Like he says things like, I'm neglecting something, highly inaccurate. And yeah, the exotic stuff was an insult.
yeah,
It's not just condescending because it's basic, but he's like humoring me by calling it exotic even though it's basic. Like he's sort of saying it's exotic to you.
yeah. Okay, that's sort of. I mean, I guess that makes a bit more sense, but it's worse as a statement then. Like it's meaner or like there's more social dynamics in it if that's the case.
Yeah. There's also the phrasing is even more exotic. So
Yeah,
Zor
it's
is
like
in fact more exotic than or. But like he didn't need words like even and exotic to say that Zor is more obscure than or. And he didn't even need to say it's more obscure. That's like super condescending to even be like, well, you
yeah,
haven't heard of Zor. I mean, sorry, you haven't heard of or, and then here's an even more obscure one, Zor. Like, it's gonna blow your mind. Venerated. What a brag.
it's such a wanky thing to say. Like, I mean, it's like this whole sentence like just struck me as um just someone. It's what someone says when they're talking out their ass, sort of thing. Like we've got this famous thing, and then we're well advised to come up with, which is his judgment.
Yeah,
Like
by
that
the
it's
way, do you
well
know what that
advised.
link goes to?
So I clicked it before. So yeah, Bayes' laws about multiple
It's his,
hypothesis testing.
it's his own post, is what I mean. The
Oh,
venerated
okay.
thing is his own article on LessWrong.
Oh, it's got 85 upvotes. That's apparently the
Venerated, yeah. Well, hover
I
it.
mean,
It's probably not. The votes
like
count
to.
more on this site. The numbers are inflated. If you have, see, 22
Oh wow,
votes.
22 votes.
He got some strong
Um,
upvotes. Strong upvotes can give like 10 or something.
yeah. I mean, like I get to be fair, what does that even mean here? But like the multiple working hypothesis is a thing that exists like outside that. Actually, is this his site as well? Um, I don't know.
If you hover the
It's
Twitter
not
link,
active.
oh
Like
no, in the about.
like over here sort of thing, or
No, right above there.
oh
This. You might find out
oh
his
yeah.
Twitter name and then find out who he is.
Um,
And it looks
Grognor,
like maybe someone
different
else?
guy.
Hard to tell.
I think it's
I don't
someone
know. It's
else.
someone with 750 followers, so it is
Okay.
obscure.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I've got like I don't know, a bunch of followers because someone was like, you need to do this. These followers like mean nothing.
Oh, yeah. There's like follow backs are one of the things. You have to look
Yeah,
at the like following follower ratio.
yeah. Like I'm pretty terrible with that. It's like, yeah,
Oh, they're like
even
a
the
tie.
yeah. It's because that was exactly like what happened, and then I was like, this is stupid. Um,
Yeah, so I think you could have used the checklist more, like more explicitly gone through who's putting in how much effort, who's asking for how much effort, who's presenting themselves as having a lot of value, etc.
yeah.
Like I think some of these
Um,
things are inspired by the checklist, but you could like it would help explain it if you mentioned the checklist reasons a bit more.
yes, yeah. Um, I sort of I was thinking about it earlier on in the like writing it, and um, it felt like I would be saying a lot of the same stuff, a lot of this, like a lot of the time. Um, and I didn't want to like, repeat the same things too much. Um,
Okay, so suppose we have a chain like this. Like here's our root node. There's a bottleneck somewhere in here that's like the weakest link. And so this is all conjunctive, right? It's pure and relationships, and like everything has to work, and then our project succeeds or our idea works or whatever. Make sense?
yep.
Okay. Now I will draw in some disjunctive relationships with blue. Like this particular node, there are 3 things that would work. And like this node, there are 2 things that would work. And this node has 2 things, you know?
And that is that
Like
like
the blues are alternatives. Like you can OR them together in that particular spot.
yeah. So like like the bottom left or middle bottom one can go to either of the 3 in the middle, and then either of the 3 in the middle can go to the root node.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about
If
the
any
yeah,
one of
yep,
these works, then the chain works. So they're just alternatives, like a plan B for that particular node.
yep. If the thing falls out, then you just slot in the next one.
Yeah. So now we look at this whole picture. Is there a bottleneck? Is there a node that we should be the most concerned about causing our project to fail? Or not just a specific node, but possibly a set of nodes. Like it could be, this particular spot is most likely to fail despite having 3 options because they're all really bad or something, right?
Mm. Yeah. Well, there's also still single points of failure. But yeah, but it's
Right.
I mean, yeah, we could argue that, or I can see the logic that like, you need all 3 of them to break for the thing to break, but that doesn't like say anything about the collection of ideas. Um, Moreover, it doesn't say anything about the other stuff that isn't part of that like uh little 3 node thing.
Yeah. So wherever you have disjunctions, you just treat them as group and you say what's the chance of this group
The whole group.
fails? Yeah.
Yeah.
But this group is, I don't know, 40%. And then this node down here is 60%. Or I wrote 66, whatever. And this node is like 99%. You can go through and you can find the weakest link. It's
Yeah.
just not necessarily a single link, it can be a disjunction group. And so this
Well,
doesn't change the analysis in like a significant way.
no. Moreover as well, like ideas are sort of like somewhat like fractal in nature in the way that they like have layers of abstraction. Um, like any one of those ideas, you can like zoom in sort of thing, and you'll get like your own little graph on the inside. for that idea. And it could be one of those links that breaks that causes the big idea to break. It's yeah, no, it seems like, I mean, in essence, there are like your basic unit is always conjunctive. Like disjunctive is you can always like make any disjunction into like a single node, and then you've only got conjunctions left.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. I think there's something more fundamental about conjunctions. Another thing is there's De Morgan's laws. Like if you have conjunctions and negations, you're done.
Oh yeah, as in like and not making NAND and XOR and all the rest of it type thing.
Yeah, well, specifically and not can make or.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
So when they tell me
Um,
or is a special case that's totally different, I'm like, are you sure? Do you think not is a special case that's totally different? Because if we have
yeah.
and not, then ors don't actually change anything.
Um, no. Yeah. And God, I can't remember whether XOR or how easy it is to make XOR out of other stuff. But I think in general, you can make everything out of everything else. Like you only need two. I'm not
Yeah.
sure if you like. Yeah, particularly two. Like a pair, and then you can make everything else,
Well, there's
which is really
universal
useful.
sets. NAND is universal, and plus not is universal, or plus not is universal, various other
Oh yeah, 'cause
things.
you can make everything out of NANDs.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been a long time since I've played with like logic gate level stuff. But no,
Oh,
that makes
I
perfect sense. Like,
I just did them on stream yesterday with internet rules for a while. It was fairly basic, but he managed to make and out of NAND at the end.
yeah, cool.
Yeah. The
It's
other thing I was gonna say is the probabilities are not the best way to look at the nodes. Like
mm.
it's it's just a quick approximation to point out that they're wrong even under their premises.
The way that I sort of imagine it to give me like a physical analogy is so ignoring the lengths of between nodes, like they can just be arbitrary length. But like all the little heads that we have at the end, or the leaves at the end, if you imagine that they're all attached to a wall, or like the inside of a rotated parabola, so that you've got equal distances or whatever else.
Uh-huh.
But you like attach them so that the like load is like equally borne across everything,
Yeah, yeah, I
and then you just pull
understand.
on it. Which one breaks first?
Yes,
And
you
that's
can pull on a tree
always.
with equal force on all branches in an appropriate way.
Yep. And then you've essentially just got like a load bearing capacity type thing, which is way better than probability. You don't need like you don't need to worry about all this finicky adding up to one, or like what does this mean type thing. You can just say they have some values, and one of them is going to have less than the others.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the exact details on that, because if we pull on these two, then is this one here going to get pulled on too hard? Because it's getting pulled on from like two branches instead of one.
Um, so yeah, in
Like,
terms of exact physical forces analogies, I think that like just adding more stuff does make it better, like stronger. But like if you added more things here, not just the I'm moving my mouse, but it's hard to see. Um, oh, I could like along like this thing. If you added more stuff in there, then it would bear more load across those. Like each of the individual branches would bear more load. Um, and
my
then
point
but
was
more would
that
be on this.
if we pull on every leaf with equal force, then the more leaves that lead into a node, the more that node gets pulled on. Like when a node has multiple leaves next to it. Like
Yeah.
if we just go to the end here and we go
Yeah. So
like this node could get pulled on really hard. That was my concern.
I think there's some weird subtleties that mean that it doesn't quite work out intuitively, but I mean, I can't remember the first principles of physics to do it, and someone's probably made a video on bridges that basically deals with this exact problem.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Um,
It's not that important though. The important thing, the
no, yeah,
concept is not very hard, which is pull with equal stress on all of the things and see which one breaks, and you've got your answer. Like it's not hard to
um,
imagine that.
the other thing, because we're dealing with a conceptual construction, like that, like V bit in the middle, you can just duplicate the two like parent nodes of those things so that you have so that they're just duplicated in like the tree. And then you just have continuous like single lines going between each leaf and
Oh, you're saying
the root.
avoid all the merging and just have many different branches. So every leaf node goes its entire whole branch all the way to here.
Yeah. And that way you
Yeah,
could avoid that problem entirely
right.
in our, analogy thing. Um, but yeah,
Yeah, and even this
cool.
one, you could make multiple copies of this final node and just have all of them, each different
Oh
branch
yeah,
goes into the wall directly.
yeah. You could just like having like a block of wood or something, and then equal like lines coming down to a weight. That would be the same sort of thing. One of them is going to break first. Or just, well, you'd probably want individual weights so that you don't get like a catastrophic effect if you were trying to physically model it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Okay,
but
so
the
see you
reality is
next
the same
time.
for all of them. Yep, that sounds good. See you in 2 days.
Okay, bye.